we can start with identifying a big problem that we have as humanity. This is related to all sorts of changes, but first of all the climate change, as we know. And then also we have societal changes, quite fast rate. Society is getting richer, the people's preferences are changing towards forest, towards environment. And all these changes are creating quite a lot of risk and uncertainty about how to act with everything, including forest.
BHD 103,8.
103,8.
Okay, Transponder.
Alles klar.
Entfernung genommen. Höhe 42,8.
42,8.
Kronenansatz 22,4.
22,4. Danke.
So what we want to achieve is we want to have forests and forest stands that are more resilient than facing these changes, and also that we can maintain capacity or even to increase their capacity to provide different ecosystem services, such as wood products, recreational values, environmental values, and so on. So we build certain scenarios about future, what it can be in terms of climate change, in terms of how people deal with climate change. And then we have a number of case studies in different countries throughout Europe. And then we analyze these alternative forest management models.
Okay, so I'm Peter Bieber. I'm a forest growth and yield scientist here at Technische Universität München. And my job in ALTERFOR was, on the one hand, being the coordinator of the modeling works in the 2 German case studies, but at the same time, together with Martin and Eva Maria Nordström, I was responsible for leading work package 3, the landscape level simulations. And it's really it's been a very interesting challenge to harmonize things. For example, I learned a lot of the collaboration with the ecosystem expert group, Adam, Mats Lindblad, and also Kevin Black from Ireland, because I tried to do a few jobs in getting the different models outputs from the case studies harmonized, and this was a very interesting and rich kind of collaboration we had.
Okay, my name is Martin Nieuwenhuis. I'm professor of forestry in University College Dublin. And it was good to have more than one person dealing with this, because it was quite heavy duty at times. If I think about the work that we did, it was very much working with the people in the individual countries, in the case study areas, the local case study coordinators, that really, of course, had to do the work. And what we tried to do was coordinate and push and pull to get information from them, so we could produce the reports that were required.
I'm Fulvio Di Fulvio. I work at the International Institute of Applied System Analysis, IASA, in Austria, in Luxembourg, and we are involved in the ALTERFOR project in the work package 2 for the European scale analysis. And our function in the project in ALTERFOR has been to connect the case study and different landscape analysis to a broader European scale view on the possible outcomes of taking up alternative forest management. And then we produced stylized models of management, which we fed in our models. And our models provide an upscaling at the European scale of what could be the possible consequence of extending on large surfaces the different alternative managements, especially effects of having more multifunctional management or more productive management in the forest.
My name's Adam Felton. I'm an ecologist based in Sweden, but originally from Australia. And my job was to work with primarily with the ecosystem services aspect of ALTERFOR. And this was an interesting aspect because it wasn't identified purely as a work package in itself, but it basically bridged across multiple work packages. People like, for example, may prefer larger trees or a variety of trees when they're walking through a forest, or a particularly large views rather than being closed in by the forest. And so it's like trying to find those little pinpoints which say to you, hey, look, this is something that's universal or universal enough to build upon, and then varying your measures. So, for example, a diverse stand in Sweden will not have the same diversity of tree species as one, for example, say in Italy. But the highest possible diversity, for example, of tree species, say in Sweden, might be lower than Italy, but it still might be a direction that tells us that is a positive thing. And keeping that and allowing us to some kind of harmonize those differences gives us the ability to then work within the scenarios which are also universal.
Well, we collect a lot of different type of data over the whole period of ALTERFOR. That includes qualitative data based on qualitative interviews, but also participatory observations to get a better understanding about which factors contribute to successful knowledge transfer, or which factors can even stop that successful knowledge transfer takes place, especially from a big EU-funded project like ALTERFOR.
Hier in der Liberose Heide gab es diesen großen Truppenübungsplatz, der hier 1994 aufgegeben wurde von den sowjetischen Streitkräften und seitdem wieder Wald wird. Wir versuchen als Landesforst den Wald sicher zu machen, ihn zu entmunitionieren, Bomben, Munition, Granaten, alles was sich hier so findet, zurückzubauen, damit der Wald dann irgendwann wieder seine Funktion erfüllen kann, sprich die Nutzfunktion der Holzproduktion sozusagen, der Schutzfunktion, also des Schutzes der Güter, Boden, Wasser, Luft und vor allem auch der Erholungsfunktion. Die Leute sollen hierher kommen, die sollen sich den Wald anschauen. Wir wollen mit Kindern, mit Jugendlichen hier Waldpädagogik betreiben. Alle Funktionen sollen hier idealerweise vereinbart werden.
Die Stiftung Naturlandschaften Brandenburg ist ja eine Wildnisstiftung. Wir wollen also Wildnis, das ist für jeden was anderes. Und wie das aussieht, ja, das können wir nicht absehen. Das wollen wir auch gar nicht beeinflussen. Die Stiftung hat in den letzten 10 Jahren einen Waldumbauplan gehabt. Also in verschiedenen Rastern haben wir im Wald verschiedene Maßnahmen unternommen, um die Naturverjüngung anzuregen, um Lichtinseln zu schaffen. Es ist auch viel Naturverjüngung gekommen, hauptsächlich natürlich Kiefer und Birke. Der einzige Faktor, der das immer begrenzt, die Naturverjüngung, ist das Wild. Und um zu gucken, wie die Natur sich entwickeln würde ohne den Wildeindruck, haben wir Gatter gebaut auf den Flächen, Hordengatter. Die stellen eine Welt dar, die es nicht gibt. Wir wollen ja das Wild nicht weghaben, aber die zeigen uns eben, dass das Wild schon sehr viel dazu beiträgt, dass wir eben diese Armut an Arten hier haben. Und ohne den Wilddruck wäre natürlich diese Vielfalt, die wir anstreben, schneller erreicht. Aber es ist eben, wie es ist. Wir lassen natürliche Prozesse zu. Wir lassen das Waldbild zu, was eben kommt.
There is enormous diversity of approaches to manage forest, and when you try to assess what is happening in the landscape and what sorts of ecosystem services are provided, of course, since forest management is quite different, also the outcomes in the landscape will be quite different. That is maybe the first most important finding, that there is no one size fits all. It's big diversity. Here we have an example of a small-scale forest owner. He's just standing in his forest, Eucalyptus globulus plantation, which is 12 years old. And for most Europeans, for other parts of Europe, people, it's just amazing that so quickly, in 12 years, you have already more or less mature forest. And also, the decision-making for that owner is, for most people from other parts of Europe, that would be very strange. He is thinking, should I harvest the forest now so that I avoid the major risk of fire, or should I wait for 1 or 2 years more, because economically it is still beneficial to keep growing forest for a couple of years. However, there is a very high risk of fire damage, so he is kind of uncertain about the best decision here.
Sr. António, que condições é que gostaria de ter para fazer uma melhor gestão florestal aqui assim na sua propriedade?
As condições eram, se fosse algo mais, eu acho que o Estado devia de incentivar, não é? Dar ajuda a quem limpa os terrenos e mantém os terrenos organizados, não é? O que não acontece, e isto é um esforço, quando se chega a cortar a madeira, uma parte fica em limpezas e depois sujeito a, se houver incêndio, fica sem nada, não é?
So a scientist goes out and meet the private forest owner, and why should he do that? One of the reasons is just to better understand the reality. Quite often scientists are sitting in their, as we call it, ivory towers, creating some advanced models or nice theories, but with quite little impact on practice. And here we see the scientist going and talking to an owner, understanding better his immediate needs, his way of thinking, and so on. So if you take the right standpoint as a scientist, you can also become an agent of a change. You're trying to push instead of just sitting back in your university chair and doing some advanced modeling. We first get very deep presentation of the context of the local study with historical milestones, why we have management we have today. And then next day we would go out to forest, which normally is very insightful. It gives a lot of understanding for researchers from their home country, but also for all the guests that are meeting there. And we found it a very fruitful approach for learning, as we call it, learning while traveling.
Is it due to decreasing growth or fire?
Of the fire cycle here. But I mean, if I would take contact with the contract,
you are all having parallel conversations.
I would know that there will be 20% timber and 80% pulpwood. Need for my son. Yeah.
Thank you.
We had a local discussion about the world market.
Questions this way, please.
Is all the trees at the same age here? You said you would do, because you made one cutting on all trees then?
All trees.
Okay,
yes.
Because some of them are so big and some of them are so small.
Yeah, because when you choose the shoots, they don't always develop the same way. So there are bigger shoots and smaller shoots.
So they're all 12 years.
But they're all the same age, yeah.
When we talk about impacts, I would like to differentiate between outputs, outcomes, and impacts. So outputs is what we produce in our project, like all the simulation runs. We also will establish demonstration sites of different alternative forest management models. We had with traveler exceptions, all these other outputs that we can directly produce. And then they lead to certain outcomes, that is the effects that our targeted stakeholders can perceive or get to see the difference. Like, for example, better understanding of alternative ways to manage forest. And then, in turn, these outcomes in the longer term would lead to impact. So changes in a bigger scale. So first of all, we need a change in managing forest, which takes time because you have to convince the stakeholders, the managers. It will not happen like this. It can take years and decades to change people's minds and traditions. And of course, if you have the changes in forest management, it in turn will lead to the changes in ecosystem service provision and in resilience. And you can say that outcomes, it is something that we work for to achieve in the project, and impacts, it is something that we hope for, that it will happen if we are successful in our outcomes.
If the ideas from ALTERFOR should have some impact, we must reach the people who take the decision in the forest. And one way is to having demonstration sites. And we are right now in the middle of a demonstration site with a mixture of spruce and birch. We know a lot about pure spruce and pure birch stands, but we have very little of this mixture. So the information for this type of stands is very important for doing these recommendations, for simulations of growth and yield, for long time forecast of production in Sweden, if we are going to have much more of birch in mixture with spruce. So it's an important input for a project like ALTERFOR.
When you have people visiting here, it depends very much on what kind of group, how the discussion grows. Like, for instance, if you have people here more interested in biodiversity, they will talk about that and look at the ground, talk about the birds. And if you have people more interested in production, they will say, oh no, this is not so good, pure spruce is better, it's better. So it's depending a lot on what kind of groups you have and what kind of question you can discuss. We are now trying to collect some materials about this, write down some information materials, and the idea is maybe not to have signs out here, but instead work in a more modern way, we think. So maybe we put the information out on the website that you can pick up your mobile phone and you can see the information. And then it's also more easy for us to update the information. If we have signs out here, it will break, a moose will come running down it, etc., etc. Here we can get new information all the time. So here, for example, this is a map and a description of the mixed forest, spruce and birch here in Asa. And this information you can find in a large database called Silva Boreal. And you can find a map exactly where it is and what kind of treatments you have. Also who to contact if you want to know more. And how to find some background. So this is an easy way to find some facts about the experiment.
Yes, a project like ALTERFOR done a lot of scientific work that is calculations and presented in papers and at conferences. But to really have an impact on forestry, the people who do the decision, who manage the forest, they also need to be involved. And we think that the most important way to do that is to inform them and have information material they can read, and especially to come out in the field and see themselves. Maybe here at the site take part of written material, or by internet see demonstrations and find the maps and come, but nothing of that can replace their own visit to field and see by themselves how it looks with the mixture on the changes in flora and take part of the forest atmosphere.
And when it comes to the problem of mitigating the climate change, there is this very heavy debate between those who are supporters of storing the carbon in forests versus those who are saying that we have to grow forests more intensively to harvest more and store the wooden products. And actually, the true answer is very hard to get. It also depends, among other things, on what time scales we use. And this is far from being resolved, and it cannot be resolved by single project. Of course, it's to a very large extent a political issue, how different actors take a stand on this. But of course, to some extent, it's also a scientific problem, but we need to have better answers from science on this. What will happen in terms of storing carbon in forests and harvesting and storing carbon in products and with having substitution effects. We contributed, I think, by providing such a quite neat methodology that could be applied in any European country. So definitely we didn't solve the climate change issue, but we made our small contribution to the puzzle, solving the puzzle.